He is the Anakin of Dune, where he's the fallen hero, the anti-hero almost, but he's not.
Taylor Swift?
No. No. There's nothing to do with Taylor Swift. Is it because she has a song named Anti-Hero?
Yeah.
She didn't come up with the phrase anti-hero. There are so many other examples of anti-hero that aren't just Taylor Swift.
Cut it out!
No! It's for the content!
You stupid content.
I know.
Hello there.
Don't have a good day. Have a great day.
Talk to me, Goose.
I'm gonna steal the Declaration of Independence.
Why so serious?
World!
I could do this all day.
Are you watching closely?
Welcome, everybody, to the One I Feel podcast. I'm your host, Seth Mossberg, and I'm here in a brand new spot with not a brand new person, but this is my fiance, Ellie. She's been on one other episode of The Sound of Freedom, and we're just doing an in-person one because she's like the only co-host that I ever see in person. Everyone else is like in Virginia or something. So
That's the only reason.
we are here to talk about Dune 2, and the video people will get a taste at what our recording setup looks like. It's pretty bougie, if you ask me.
I agree. Handheld mics.
Handheld mics, we're bumping up in the world. We got upgrade from our obviously $1 million setup that I usually have with all of the LEDs and the TV screens and the couch that are really real. I just realized that this couch is very similar to the one that's in my very real office. It's like the brownish red love seat. Anyways, that's the only
Keep
comparison.
that as the description because then you have to watch the video to know what we're
Exactly. If you are an audio-only listener, what are you doing? At least pop into the video and say hi. Okay, so we're talking about Dune today. Dune 2 just released. It'll be last weekend by the time you're listening to this, but we watched it yesterday. We watched the first Dune about a month ago because we'd never seen it before. What do you think about Dune? Like, it's not quite Star Wars. A lot of people like to compare it to Star Wars, but it's also its own thing. It's a lot of movie is what we said.
Yes.
It's a very movie. What did you like? What did you not like?
Well, first of all, you said comparing it to Star Wars, and I think that's a big thing. Like, the whole time I was watching the first movie, it was consistently, and that reminds me of Star Wars, especially because it's on a sandy planet. Like, it literally is like Tatooine. And so while I was watching, like, they kept getting kind of reminders of that, but at the same time, it was very different. And this is stupid, but the helicopters are cool.
Helicopters are cool. Yeah. So yeah, the first Dune book released in 1965, which is before really sci-fi movies took off. And if there were sci-fi movies released in that time period, they were very wacky. Not to say Star Wars wasn't wacky, but it releasing in 1977 was still a little bit of progress from both movie industry and just social commentary on things like science fiction. I know that even C.S. Lewis wrote science fiction books, but I don't think those are going to be adapted. They got pretty wacky because space travel was very new and different. Yeah, so it was 1969 when the first moon landing happened. That's not to say NASA wasn't doing things or space exploration wasn't being explored. So it's not like the concept of flight was new for these science fiction books, but I believe the space race really pushed forward for science fiction and what it actually looked like instead of just being a myth. So having Dune released in 1965 was a very different type of world of science fiction than what they did 4 years later in actually going to space and landing on the moon. And then what came after that with Star Wars and other science fiction after that. My point being that Dune is very different from Star Wars, even though we like to compare it to Star Wars because it's so similar.
Well, it's our basis for that kind of.
That's what I meant.
science fiction.
It's our basis for science fiction and space exploration at that. And there are some comparisons I want to make between the two, but they are still very different. There's no aliens in Dune. Well, I'm not as in races, like the characters. There's the sandworm for sure, but there's a sandworm and obviously some creatures that are different. But unlike Star Wars, where there are sentient, different languaged characters, it's more of a earthly nomad type of world where there are different cultures, but they're all still human-esque, either with face painting or tattoos or different. Like the Harkonnens don't have hair, at least in the movie.
Eyebrows. It's really weird.
Hair is eyebrows.
Yeah.
They all have alopecia, is basically what I'm saying.
Edit that out.
No. Content. What about the story of Dune, the Messiah, the chosen one, as some may the comparison? for Star Wars.
Yeah. Well, first of all, the first movie there was, like we said, there was so much movie that I got lost in the story. There was so much to remember. So when I started watching the first one, I had to keep asking you, like, who's this guy and what's this guy's story and what happened here? And I had seen the movie, like, a week or two beforehand? And it still was going over my head because there was just so much story to remember. And that might just be my slightly ADHD brain, but still, I could not, like, put these pieces together because there's so much content.
No, I agree. There's so much story. There's a lot of world building that happens in the first one. A lot of different types of names and so many characters that even expanded more into the second one, where you're just like, I have a hard time. You told me before recording, you're like, I have no idea what characters' names are. I'm just going to be referring to them by their
old guy
features and their So it's a lot to take in, and they did cram a lot into these movies when books are a lot easier to do that. And especially, I'm a faces guy, and so I see faces instead of names, and so seeing the face is easier for me, but then I can't describe it because I don't know what the character's name is. That's different for a book because obviously it says the character's name over and over and over again, but until that happens in a movie, like I know Stilgard's name because they kept saying Stilgard. Paul is pretty obvious, Chani, and then after that I'm like, I have no idea. So
I think, hot take, I think that's why I like reading books more than movies sometimes, especially with stuff like Dune, because I haven't read the books, but I honestly think I'd enjoy them more because you kind of build over time and you can come back to it, and you're seeing the names, it's more tangible in front of you, which is also why I use subtitles.
I read movies and watch books. It should be a shirt coming to you soon.
Turn on the subtitles. That was meant to be the voice.
Paul's commanding voice. I don't even know what that's called. That's the other thing. We haven't read the books. So don't expect this to be a big comparison between the two. I've done a little bit of research, but a lot of it is just...
the books?
I read about the books. I didn't bother reading the books. Apparently, they adapted it really well, but still left a lot of stuff out. Part of it is because it has to be cut down because it's a movie. That's some sacrifices you have to make, but it's also pretty good for what it is. It's a recreation of a book that's actually 6 books long. I did not know that. I thought it was 2. I thought it was 1, to be honest. I thought it was 1 book at the beginning, and then they were splitting 1 book into 2 movies, just like they did with the last Hunger Games. But then I found out there were 6 more books, and I watched a video on the entire summary of the entire series. It gets really weird at the end. So the books, Irulan, who is Florence Pugh's character, obviously is married to Paul, and I believe has a son who then turns into, he injects himself with sandworm blood, and I believe turns into a deformed crossover between the two. It gets really weird, and then he becomes like the emperor of emperors. I don't know. There's a video I'll link below that if you want the entire story of all 6 books and don't want to read them in just like a 12-minute video, that's going to be in the description. But apparently also Chani in the books is okay with Paul marrying Irulan, because that's kind of what was assumed, is that you're going to do that for the I almost said industry, for the kingdom, I suppose. And I believe they changed that in Dune Part 2. Also, spoilers start here. If you haven't watched or read Dune, we've said some spoilers now, but they're gonna get really deep here.
Yeah, there's good spoilers. I was gonna say, are we gonna go talk about all of them?
No, we're gonna do a lot. They changed the way Chani reacted to Irulan and Paul being betrothed or engaged at the very end, because I believe they wanted the heartthrob reaction from people like you. That makes sense. Like, that's not how love is supposed to work. You're supposed to marry the one you love, and yet he loves Chani, but knows that it's important to marry Irulan.
Sure. Yeah.
Sure.
Politics.
Spoilers. Are you saying it like ASMR? Do it.
No, what?
Do it.
Eat it? Because it's fuzzy and it's gonna get wet.
There we go. Everyone has left the episode now because we grossed them out. All right. So a lot of people, they saw Dune 4 years ago and knew that it was incomplete. It didn't feel like it built to anything. I don't know when it was announced that it was only part 1. I heard that it wasn't shown as part 1 in any of the trailers, and when people got to the theater, it said Dune Part 1, and everyone was confused.
Fast X did the same thing?
Fast X did the same thing this last year, but I might not have just been keeping up to date back in or 3 years ago. But the whole point of Dune 1 is that it's building up to Dune 2. It finishes somewhere, I would say, even if you look at Dune Part 1 and 2 as a complete story, Dune 1 is really the first act. Dune 2 has the second and third act of the whole story. And so that's where it felt unresolved. And I think that was very wise. I haven't seen the original. We should watch the original sometime because they are wacky.
Oh, right. I forgot they were...
There's 2 original movies. The first was, I believe, just one movie, which that's why I'm interested to see it, is if they crammed all that story into one movie. And they actually included stuff that was not in these movies. There's also a TV series that nobody really talks about, so that's why it was interesting that it exists. But it would be, interesting to at least see what their takes on that was. Anyways, they really spread out the story to give what it deserved between 2 movies, and the studios probably really liked that because it was 2 movies. Yes, it's more expensive, but it's more profits as well. And Dune is already doing really good in the box office, I believe. I think I said in our 2024 predictions episode that I didn't see any billion-dollar movies in 2024, but I think Dune could top that and possibly be the one that does that.
You're saying you didn't foresee it?
Didn't foresee it. Just like Paul foresees things, I suppose.
Isn't it Usul now?
Usul. Yeah, whatever.
Or what's his Sandmouse name?
You can't remember Chani. You can't remember.
I can remember 3 names for one guy, but I can't remember anything.
They can only be 4-letter names. Usul, Paul. You gotta.
I can't remember the other one because it's still longer.
Because it's 5 letters. Yeah. So as we talk about both the story of Dune and the style of Dune, I think it, like we said, it's a very movie, as in there's a lot of movie in this movie, but it's not a bad thing. It uses every dollar of its budget to the greatest extent. It might have been a little expensive, but for the visual effects side of things, you can't notice anything wrong with it. And that's me speaking with a degree in animation. I have a degree in animation. Yeah. So it looks flawless. There's nothing that really looks bad about it, and you're not watching it and going, ew. There's no Flash moments. There's no Madam Web moments. Everything is planned, and a good movie will be storyboarded. If you don't know what a storyboard is, it's in pre-production when the director, writer, producer will go through the entire script and draw out or plan out every single frame, every single cut to show what they're going to need, and to start figuring out budget and who they need to hire for extras and people working behind the scenes. And I think that every shot was intentional for the most part. I'm generalizing for sure. Every shot was intentional. Every visual effects scene shot was carefully planned and looked really well. Looked good. What would I do without you?
Yeah, bad grammar.
Poor grammar and incorrect pronunciation.
Putting the emphasis on the wrong syllable.
Pronunciation. Things like...
Can't get over the spatula.
What do you mean it's a very high-end microphone?
High-tech microphone. Edit that out. No, if they're still listening, it's fine.
Anytime anyone says edit it out, I'm just going to be like, content, no edit outs. And even if you did edit it out, you wouldn't know because I'm the only one who sees it.
It's true.
So I choose what you listen to. The things about storytelling through visual effects is especially shown in the Black Sun scene from the second movie in the arena. They filmed that in infrared, and you can see it in some of the shadows where they're not in the black sun, but you can see some colors, and then it fades as they get closer to the sun or closer to the sunlight. And they did that really well. I wonder why that worked and not the Thor Love and Thunder final fight on the world that has sucked all the color out of it. I don't really know what that purpose was, but the reason for why it was black and white in Dune makes a lot more sense, because it's like the Darksaber, where instead of emitting light, it takes light or something like that. Still not physically accurate or possible, but it makes logical sense, even if that's science fiction.
They explain it better, yeah.
Yeah, they explain it better, and it looks really cool. So there was reason behind why they made it look that way.
Yeah, because when we were in the theater, I could tell you would get giddy when the bombs would go
Hey,
off.
don't expose me like that.
No, it's the thing. Like, it's really cool, and you get a lot of that in the first movie too. But like, I feel like it escalates because the war's escalating, and you get like those giant missiles that they're launching, and the whole thing goes up. And it's also like the power of it, because you see someone with this handheld weapon and you're like, that's gonna leave a dent in this massive machinery, and then all of a sudden this whole thing just blows up and you're like, holy crap.
Yeah, nukes are pretty cool.
Yeah, that's the takeaway.
No, actually the explosions were really good. The way that visual effects has grown is really interesting to see what things they have focused on. Things especially like you've seen water turn a lot more realistic in the recent years. That's why Avatar: The Way of Water looks so good, is they kind of finalized that. I would say explosions were finalized probably a decade plus ago. You couldn't really tell because there's a blurry line between using practical explosions and visual effects explosions, but visual effects explosions have looked good for a while now, and I think they really just turned that notch just a little bit up even for Dune to figure out how to make it look just that little bit better. And a lot of that even has to do with how they use the explosions, including the ships that have shields on them. When they have shield piercing explosions or missiles or whatever they're using, having it explode inside the shield and then the shield evaporates into a fireball, like that was something that they had to figure out. How do you make an explosion inside something transparent that you don't see because the shield is supposed to be invisible? But then there's also like when it's being threatened, the shield is like vibrating and
so cool.
It's like tearing the colors apart.
I think of distortion. I can't think of.
Yeah, it's distorting around the edges, and that's a really cool effect. I believe there was a lot of visual effects mastery with the ornithopters.
That's what they're called. The helicopter things. Yeah.
Well, they're called thopters for short, but I think it's ornithopters.
Yeah.
It's a fun word to say. Yeah, for the first movie, that was kind of their big achievement. But again, the explosions also were top notch. For this next one, there are a lot. I think in both of them, it shows the war part of it, and that's kind of their level of artillery when you have machines that are so massive. I especially love the interesting weapon of like the massive magnet pads that turn into explosions. Like they launch the magnet pads, it hits the tank and then blows them. I was expecting a really cool kill from some people getting in between the magnet and the machine.
I thought of that, but wouldn't they just
No, I know, but it would have been like an and smash.
Oh, I see.
And then explode.
I see. I thought you meant someone would like be riding it and then like
no.
launch off of it.
They were running in between on the sand next to the machine, and I was like, oh, what if one of them got caught in between? It'd be terrible, but creative. Is that justified?
Best not to overthink it.
Okay. So fight scenes in Dune.
Cool. I actually thought they were really well choreographed.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially the last one where it's...
This
is where no, I want to try to butcher the names. The bald creepy guy and Willy Wonka.
Yes.
Gollum.
What?
Gollum.
I was gonna say Jeff Bezos versus Willy Wonka. Gollum for bald creepy guy kind of works as well. His name is Fade Rotho, or Nabaran, I believe, is his title. But I believe a lot of the actors did their own stunts, which is always better than doing it with stuntmen. It helps it look more real, having the characters do it instead of face replacements, which have been pretty good, but also don't always look good. It's obvious when you know that Timothée Chalamet can't do something like that, but it also looks really good when he does. Mm-hmm. I still have a little bit of a gripe with how the fight scenes look. They are acted well and done well with emotional beats and all of that, but I still think the camera's angles are way too close. And if you watch it again, you'll notice that it's almost still an over-the-shoulder shot. When there were a couple where it was pulled back. There was one where they were almost silhouetted against the orange background, and that looked really cool. Even though you couldn't see details, you could still tell what fight moves they were doing. Whereas when it's over the shoulder, you still can't really tell what's going on and which punches are being thrown. I feel like a good fight scene is one that can be watched and replicated pretty easily. If you are watching it and you are like, I don't really know what that move was, I just know that his shoulder moved in a way, and I don't know where the other guy was hit, that makes it blurry and not crisp, and that's I don't want to hold the standard to the old Jackie Chan movies where they did.
But you are.
I am, but I am doing that. But those show the intensity that you can do a fight scene in, and I've even seen Instagram videos of stuntmen doing choreographed fights that are just one take without any need to cut or hide their work in movie shot or in camera angles. I don't think they were not confident with their fight choreography, but I wish they were more confident. And there's a lot in a lot of movies these days is trying to use camera techniques or other things to cover up the lack of confidence in those areas, even when it comes to story. Like, I think that this is a very hot take. I think that the casting of the Fantastic Four is a precursor to worrying that their story isn't going to be enough. Whereas James Gunn casting nobodies, they've been in other things, but James Gunn casting nobodies in Superman and Batman and other movies that he's making for the DCU shows that he has confidence in his stories. Whereas I don't know that Marvel has confidence in what they're writing, in what they're making, so they're using star power as their driving force. That was a little bit of a tangent, but that's
they're
my
desperate.
desperate. Yes. Speaking of star power, Dune had a lot, but I don't think that was its problem. There's a lot of big name actors in this one, but I don't think its problem was riding off of star power, even though that helped a lot because it added to it instead of trying to make up for.
Yeah. Well, I think with this movie, because it's such a nerdy concept, it helps to have star power to make it more of a pop culture movie.
Sure.
Like, more people are going to go see it if you're like, oh, Zendaya's in it. Cool. I'm going to go watch that.
Yeah.
Because it's pop culture.
They also did that with Madam Web and Sydney Sweeney and Dakota Johnson. So
Yes, but that wasn't. Everyone knew that was going to be bad. There was no way it could have been good.
I suppose you're right. But also, I think all of the stars that were cast, it was more of what Marvel was at its peak. Like, let's say that's like the 2016 era where Benedict Cumberbatch gets cast as Doctor Strange. Like, that's kind of a big deal. That was not a, we don't trust our script or our story. That was a, let's get somebody as big as Benedict Cumberbatch on this thing.
He also fit the character well.
He did.
Played the character well.
That's what the Dune is also about. That
Yeah.
They fit the character well, and they bring a lot more to the story and help pull the story along in the way it's supposed to, and even more so. So the story of Dune, I think, is probably one of the most interesting. We can talk about movie making and cast and fight choreography and all that all day long, but the story is what makes it unique. That's what sets it apart from Star Wars or anything else. But that's what makes it not Star Wars.
Among other things.
Among other things. Star Trek. Do I dare mention Star Trek? I've never watched Star Trek. I legitimately, that's one of the things where I don't like it because it's against Star Wars. The same way where I didn't like Avatar because it was going head to head with Avengers. I literally have never seen Star Trek, and I really should to justify my thoughts.
I've seen a couple episodes of the show. I don't know if is there
For you.
movies? I don't even know.
There's old movies and there's new movies. The new movies were made by J.J. Abrams, and that's why he was hired for Star Wars. But they're very J.J. Abrams-esque. They have lots of lens flares. They have story beats that don't make sense. Not saying J.J. Abrams is a bad director. He just has a shtick. I suppose that's kind of a hot take.
And his shtick is bad movie.
That's not what I'm saying. It's his style. Anyways, the way that Dune is different is, I believe, with how it approaches religion. The Force in Star Wars is very apersonal, or impersonal. It's just there. It's in everything. It binds everything. Whatever Qui-Gon says in Episode 1, and
Force surrounds us. It penetrates. It surrounds. It binds the galaxy together.
Yeah, whatever you say. It's a very, I believe, Hinduist mentality and perspective on life and the world, but for Dune, it's a big mix of religions, is what I thought. But also, the more I thought about it, it really leans into the Judeo-Christian religion aspects, not necessarily the theological and moral discussions and complications, but it has a lot of themes and aspects from all the religions. I think it's very Muslim-esque in the way they chant and pray, but it's, I think, most obvious, it's based in Christianity because of the Messiah part. I suppose Judaism. That's why I say Judeo-Christian.
Yeah.
Obviously, the promise of a Messiah came from the very first probably days of creation after the fall, and then other religions made their own version of the Messiah, whether it was Jesus or another coming Messiah. And the Jews didn't believe Jesus was the Messiah and still don't, and so they're still waiting for him. But regardless of that conversation, that is definitely a big inspiration for the Dune religion, and that really leans into that theme of a Messiah in the second movie. And Paul's reaction to everyone claiming he's the Messiah is so interesting and a different way to do a character arc, because for most of the movie he's like, I don't want this. He doesn't believe in the Messiah. He thinks that the family or the group that the Atreides belonged to, I forget the greater people name, or no, it was the Bene Gesserit, the female priests that are kind of the head honchos of the religion, I suppose.
Sure.
They kept spreading that rumor that there's going to be a Messiah, and it's possible, I don't know that it's ever made clear if it's true or not, if it's meant to be controlling like Paul argues it is, or if it's real like most people believe it is. But Paul and Chani really don't believe it for the longest time.
Well, I wonder if Paul was just following Chani because he was smitten, but
Possibly. But I think that plays into the character development, is that when he turns, after believing it's not a real thing and that he's not the Messiah, because there's no such thing as a Messiah in him, that when he turns and plays into that role, that's Chani's disappointment in him, is because he's now believing in the thing that will give him power, even though she knows he doesn't believe it himself.
Well, if you think about how he's torn between Chani and his mother the whole time, because his mom really wants him to embrace that. Even I don't know if I couldn't tell for sure if she actually believed it or just wanted him to take that power.
Well, she's always believed that he has power from the beginning of the first first movie where she's like, do the voice, do the roar, and she's known. And then the confrontation with the Bene Gesserit priestess, where he's trying the suffering with the hand.
Yeah.
She knew that he had power, and it's possible that she falsely attributed that to being the Messiah. But I think that's something that's supposed to spark conversation. Is he the Messiah of Arrakis, or is he just playing the role really good? There's a scene where
Well. Sorry.
what would I do without you? What would I do without you? There's a scene where Stilgard is talking with the other people who believe that he's the Messiah, and he's like, Paul walks over and he's like, I'm not the Messiah. And then they're like, he's so humble, just like the Messiah should be.
So
That's actually...
I literally facepalmed at that part. I'm like, come on!
That's like there's a clip from Monty Python. Not the Holy Grail. They did other stuff besides the Holy Grail. I forget the name of it, but it's maybe it's blasphemy, but it's from a skit series that they did about somebody who was living during Jesus' time, or actually Jesus' crucifixion, and somebody accidentally mistook the protagonist of that story for the Messiah, and he's like, no, I'm not the Messiah. The Messiah would be humble, just like he is.
Hail, Messiah! I'm not the Messiah! I say you are, Lord, and I should know. I followed a few. Hail, Messiah! I'm not the Messiah. Will you please listen? I am not the Messiah. Do you understand? Honestly!
Only the true Messiah denies his divinity.
What? Well, what sort of chance does that give me? All right, I am the Messiah. He is the Messiah!
So it's kind of it was almost directly straight from that.
That's hilarious. It's like a Monty Python.
It's possible that he's inspired by that. But at the very least, Paul's downfall is really based in falling for everything that the Messiah is and should be, and is the war leader. I think that's where he can be compared, even though I've been saying Star Wars and Dune are very different. He is the Anakin of Dune, where he's the fallen hero, the anti-hero almost, but he's not...
Taylor Swift?
No. No. This has nothing to do with Taylor Swift. Is it because she has a song named Antihero?
Yeah.
She didn't come up with the phrase antihero. There are so many other examples of antihero that aren't just Taylor Swift.
Cut it out!
No! It's for the content!
You stupid content.
Yeah, I know. He is a fallen hero, just like Anakin. Now, it's not as obvious as Anakin because you still want to like him. Anakin, with the way Star Wars released, you knew he was Darth Vader and you knew how evil he was. And it was...
What?
Spoilers. The flip from Anakin to Darth Vader is so sudden in Episode 3. Whereas with Dune, it's like, it's this conversation we're having. Is he really bad, or is he doing the good things for bad reason? Are the Fremen even the good guys? That's part of... You could say the same thing for the Rebel Alliance in Star Wars.
Is it Fremlin or Fremen?
Fremen? I think I have a friend whose name is...
Like lemon. Fremlin sounds like gremlin.
I think Fremlin is the last name of one of my college friends that I got mixed up.
Tough.
Fremen, are they the bad guys? Or are they the good guys? Just because they're the protagonists doesn't mean they're the good guys.
But they ride worms. It's cool.
They do... I'm not going to follow that logic. No real world examples of that.
Exactly. That's why I can say it.
Not to say that the Emperor and the Harkonnens are the good guys, but maybe they're both wrong. And we've been, with the way the movie is led, it wants us to side with the Fremen. And it's hard to do that when Paul does such selfish things. And he even says at the beginning of the movie, he is scared to go south because he knows he will gain power. Mm-hmm. And it scares him to do that. And yet I believe there was a moment when he was talking to Chani that she said something that made him realize that he really shouldn't be focused on her and should be focused on the mission of winning against the Harkonnens and the Emperor and all that. Could he also have been playing into their vision of a Messiah that they had built up? Or was their vision inaccurate, just like the Jews' perspective was inaccurate of what they thought the Messiah was when Jesus came? So there's the original prophecy in Dune, and then they kept making it a bigger and bigger thing, and then we're finding ways that Paul was similar to their prophesied Messiah. That obviously did not happen with Jesus. He fulfilled all of the prophecies and didn't brag about it like Paul does, but this is almost a good example of an anti-Messiah. Not the Antichrist, nothing like that, but a false Messiah, but in ways that actually line up. And that's what's so difficult, I think, to process this, is that you want it to be true, and it's possible that it's not, or it's possible that their whole Messiah shtick was either false from the Bene Gesserit, or just not meant to be good and we assume that he's good.
I feel like I really should read the books. I feel like that would help this a lot. If anyone is reading the books and they're gonna hear this whole conversation and be like, "No, that's not how it happened.
Yeah,
you need to watch to the end or like get to the end."
We're offending a lot of book readers
Yeah.
of Dune.
We're like making speculations. The information is out there. Like we have the end of the story, and we
refuse to accept it and just making our own assumptions.
like people who criticize Christianity without reading the Bible.
Why do we make the same face? No, you got to give respect to the people who criticize Christianity and have read the Bible. I just got to say that.
They just need the Holy Spirit.
Yes.
Big time. Anyways,
we are mostly talking about the movie,
right?
And not the book. While that is an interesting comparison to make. Again, there are videos in the description of very interesting breakdowns of the comparisons and differences and what the future could look. Speaking of the future of Dune, the director, Dennis...
Bless you. Move on.
I don't know his last name. I think it's French. Dennis, Mr. Dennis.
Old Denny.
I think he made a breakfast chain.
I was just saying, he's pretty good at pancakes.
Mr. Dennis.
That's my joke.
Mr. Dennis has written Dune Part 3 already, I believe, and won't come out for another 3-ish years, which makes sense. But something that I believe Jeremy Johns said in his review is that these are the types of... Jeremy Johns. Jimmy John's is also a good chain
John's
restaurant.
makes some pretty good sandwiches.
Jimmy John's and Denny's. Jeremy John's and Dennis.
Hungry.
Yeah. He said that these are the types of movies that he misses of waiting a couple years for the next installment instead of 3 movies, 5 shows, a spin-off. That's been most of Hollywood recently.
Yeah.
And so giving it time to process, to let the hype die down, and then bring it marinate. Yeah. I think having Dune 3 come out in 2027, I think would be great. I have my own predictions, and this, again, no connection to the books. This is just what I see. They have set up the end of Dune 2 to lead into Dune 3, and I believe that would cap off a trilogy. And I would hope that they leave it there, because trilogy is a good number to stop at. Kung Fu Panda 4.
We haven't seen it yet. It might be good.
Yeah, that's okay. I'll give them this one. Kung Fu Panda 4 is coming out this weekend by the time you're listening to it, and it will be next week's episode talking about Kung Fu Panda. I usually don't announce it to all the listeners, just the Discord users, but that's so you know it's coming up. My prediction for Dune 3. I see that it will time jump to Paul being an established dictator in the entire galaxy or whatever status he's climbed to, being power hungry. His sister, Aaliyah, Anya Taylor-Joy, has grown up to be a young woman.
Not a baby.
I also think that Fade Rotha's character, when he did not good things with Margot Fenring.
Another baby?
The other baby.
Yeah, okay. That's all you have to say.
The priestess.
The other baby.
Yeah, the other baby. Those two will grow up. Possibly Paul and Irula's child will also grow up. So now there's like 3 young people, 2 girls and an unknown, who would grow up and be the main characters of that third movie, where they have to deal with the political conflict that Paul has made. Paul has become power hungry and has been lost in being this false messiah, whether the prophecy was true or whether he was playing into that role, and he has lost himself. The Holy War is still going on, and he's kept playing up this facade, and his sister, his enemy's child, and possibly his child have to deal with that. And that's where the conflict comes from. He doesn't even pretend that he's pretending anymore. Like, he kind of knows that in part 2. He's just fully believes it at this point in part 3. He might come to terms with his humanity, but yet he's gotten to the status of ill-gotten power that he just has no choice but to keep being dictator, even though he hates it. And even his child or his sister are like, you can't be doing this. You can't be this type of ruler anymore. And yet there's no other way to do it. It's just a meet in the middle. Also, this is something I did get from the books or from a book review. Arrakis.
Okay, you're really just writing a movie right now.
I am, yeah.
I'm gonna take notes.
When he has a vision of Aaliyah and it's revealed that it's Anya Taylor-Joy, there's an ocean there. And it was a vision of the future where the oceans come back to Arrakis. And apparently in the books, that's a bad thing, because then the sandworms die, and then you don't have the spice, which is the whole reason Arrakis is powerful and a necessity for your empire. So in wanting to bring water to Arrakis, Paul actually dooms it because it can no longer produce spice, which I think could be interesting as well, and I think that could play into it. So that's my prediction for part 3. Is there anything else that makes sense to add in the part 3 if you were to write it?
If I were to write it, some sort of reconciliation between him and she.
Well, I mean, yes, that would probably be...
Because he actually predicts it, too, because he says she'll come around, or, like, she'll come to see it. So I don't know how that would look, or if... Like, I would hope that maybe she would bring him down a peg, but...
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting how because at the end of the movie, it's obvious that Chani is not happy with Paul in taking this marriage, and that's opposite of what the book was. I don't know if in the book he continued to love Chani. I believe in the book he ignored Irulan and didn't give her children because it was just a marriage out of convenience for politics. And so possibly he would go back to Chani, but Chani has enough common sense.
Just like, it doesn't have to be romantic, just personal reconciliation, because clearly that was like an important relationship. And then
She was left very hurt at
unresolved
the end.
conflict.
Yeah, they did leave the end of part 2 open to a lot of possibilities, and I think it's something to look forward to. That I think a lot of people slept on Dune 1. It was like Dune. I think it's a book, but then people started watching Dune 1. It had its peak, and now Dune 2 is coming out, and everyone's saying crazy stuff about it, that it's so good, and now people are going to go see both of them, and then Dune 3 is going to come out. It's going to be epic.
Well, I think you're right about Dune 1 setting up Dune 2. Like, it was still a decently paced movie, but it was slower than the second one.
Yep. So I wonder if Dune 3 is just going to be Dune Messiah, the book, made into a movie, or if they're going to just kind of do a Game of Thrones thing. Not that the other Dune books haven't come out like Game of Thrones situation was.
You're
but
going to
just
have to explain, because I'm a good
Okay.
Christian girl. Game of Thrones.
they were producing the show at the same time as the books were coming out. It got to a point where they needed to make the next season, and the book wasn't out. So they started writing their own movie script against the author's will, I believe. And so then they just differed. That's where I wonder if they're going to adhere to the Dune Messiah story, which is the second book, I believe, in the trilogy. Or not the trilogy. There's 6 books in the whole series. Or if they're going to go and start making what they kind of want, which some book purists might be upset with, but it might be necessary for the story. Again, I'm judging it off of just what the movies show, because that's what we do. We watch movies. We don't read them. No subtitles. Okay. Well, now that you have had the entire Dune movie spoiled for you, all of both of them, go watch them if you haven't. They're really good.
But there's cool explosions, so at least you
Cool
you're
explosions. There's nukes. There's guns.
We won't spoil the explosions.
There's love. Yeah, go watch them. They are very good, and they are probably some of the best movies we're gonna get. Not them. It's Dune Part 2 is probably gonna be the best movie of the year, only because there's.
Ooh, hot take.
Yes. No, I'm right, because there is, unless there's another, unless there's a Godzilla -1 movie that comes out of the woodwork later in the year, this is gonna be the biggest movie.
Hey, Godzilla x Kong may surprise you.
Don't get me started on the MonsterVerse. Okay,
Just did.
yeah, go watch those movies. What?
I just did.
Just did. Okay, go watch the Dune movies and enjoy them because they are very cool. Anyways, thank you guys for listening or watching. If you're watching, you can see us awkwardly sit like a weird Christian couple on a couch. We will be back in the $1 Million Studio. Yes, I stole it from CoffeeZilla.
What?
Don't worry about it.
YouTuber?
Yes.
Okay.
We'll be back in the studio next week talking about Kung Fu Panda because I already spoiled that. So look forward to that, and we're gonna have a lot of nostalgia. And
I think we should record the whole Kung Fu Panda episode while eating noodles with chopstick.
no, with chopstick,
Yeah.
I can't do that.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
I can't. Content. All right. Make sure to follow our socials, join our Discord, and like us on all our platforms that you're listening to. Not all of them, just the one you're listening to. That'll be enough.
Know that you are loved. God bless.
Hey, she knows it. She knows it. All right. Peace.